the air
Wonderful.
on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, all of it. All right. Father Zecharia Lynch,
Wonderful.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for.
Welcome. Oh, hold on. I should probably there we go. I should also make sure my YouTube page is closed when we do this because it was feeding back. All right. Tech boomer,
There
I
we
tell
go.
you.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right, you hear
I'm
me?
no better.
All right. You got me loud and clear now, Father.
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Okay, let's get going. You've been on
Yes.
this show. You've been on this show before, and
Yes.
so
Thank God.
people should know who you are. But give them a quick rundown of what you do and who you are and what's going on up there in your small little parish.
All right. Well, my name is Zecharia Lynch. Mainly kind of online, known because of my blog, the English Pen, where I've been covering things since 2017. Of course, I cover a number of things, but mainly things dealing with orthodoxy, modern culture, politics. I mix it all together. I'm not scared to do that because I think we have to have a cohesive worldview, and that's what orthodoxy is to bring. So I try to touch on those things. It's English Pen blog. Anyway, that's kind of what I do. Otherwise, I'm a priest in the Orthodox Church. I'm a husband, have 5 children, I'm a beautiful wife. So thank God.
And you've been writing over at the Inkless blog a lot about the stuff that's going on with Ukraine. In fact, actually, can you give you lived in Ukraine? Can you talk about that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I lived there. I mean, years ago. I lived in the Ukraine. It was the beginning actually. So right after Perestroika, the fall of the Soviet Union, my family moved to Kharkiv, Ukraine. They were Protestant missionaries at the time, of course, but Lord have mercy. So, yeah, it was my wife's from there, so I love the Ukrainian people. I love the Ukraine. So it has a dear place in my heart, definitely. So I've been following things that happen there, especially in the Orthodox in the early 2000s, and then noting certain geopolitical posturing, movements beginning to manifest themselves in the Ukraine. I began to follow those, especially on the church level, because that's where I try to focus. So
For the non-Orthodox people listening, and heck, even for some of
yes,
the Orthodox people, I want to have you kind of explain the church hierarchy within Orthodoxy and how that works, because a lot of people just understand Catholicism and there's a pope and not as familiar maybe with Orthodox hierarchy and how the structures work. Can you talk about that?
sure. I mean, in brief, the church has always been hierarchical. It's just the way Christianity is. We don't have, though, a pope. It's but the good order of the church has always been important. So there's always been. It's in the scriptures. So if anyone's a Christian, if you're not a Christian, then it's the same point that even in the New Testament, it's speaking of bishops, priests, deacons, all of these vocations that we have in the church. These ordained positions, the guidance of the church here on earth. So that's very important. Then you have patriarchs. The patriarchs are given a place of honor in the church. I'd say qualitatively they're bishops. They don't have some place necessarily. They don't have qualitative substance to them that is greater than the bishopric. They are given a place of honor, the other bishops for the good order of the church. But nonetheless, they are themselves also what we might say simply bishops, although given a place of honor in the church.
And how is it structured specifically up in Russia and how it was controlled within Ukraine as well from that patriarch?
Well, I mean, the orthodoxy, of course, in the former Soviet Union comes from, from of what was the former Soviet Union, like I just said. But the Patriarch of Moscow, of course, who is Kirill, Metropolitan is a new. The church in Ukraine is given an autonomous, they were self-governing church in Ukraine, though still in communion with, because that's very important to Orthodoxy. We have to remain in communion with each other. So they remained in communion with the church in Russia and the church in Moscow, part in councils and those kind of important actions for the church. So this is inevitable. So Patriarch of Kirill, I mean, he was commemorated in the Ukraine. One of the things the Ukrainian church did was give a blessing to stop commemorating Patriarch Kirill. Some people made a real big deal about that. I mean, I'm just speaking personally on that issue. I think anything that the Ukrainian church can do to alleviate its situation is a smart thing for them, and the cessation of commemoration of the patriarch wasn't we don't like him, but it was because there's so many feelings. I mean, we can't understand it. And that's what's happening there necessarily. There's long history. It's a historical issue, you might say. It has deep roots, which probably we couldn't even cover in this live stream. But generally speaking, there was Kirill. He's still there. Metropolitan Anufi, he's in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian church is an autonomous, self-governing church, but still in communion as it should be with the church in Russia. Ideally, the church surpasses politics. We're always changing. Look at our government. The governments are always changing here, there, all that. I mean, 2,000 years of history. So we're supposed to transcend that. Governments, even Orthodox governments in the past, didn't like each other, but the church was called to transcend that because the church is something that is both local, but also eternal. So hopefully that maybe brings a little help.
Mm-hmm. We've got a question already. I don't know if you can see that, but is there a schism between Kirill
Uh-huh.
and Constantinople before the special military operation in Ukraine?
Well, there is over the fact that, and that are the important things that I think we need, would be important to understand, is that before this, what they call it, the special military operation, a war, whatever we want to call it, I'm just going to say war, in Ukraine that was begun. Yes, because of Constantinople's meddling in the ecclesiastical affairs in Ukraine, Kirill, Patriarch Kirill, and the Moscow Patriarch ceased Eucharistic communion with the Patriarch of Constantinople over that issue. Yes, because the Patriarch of Constantinople issued a Thomas in January of 2019 to a schismatic group. In Orthodoxy, it just means you're pretending to be, you're dressing up like Orthodox, but you're not really trying to uphold the faith. I mean, obviously in the church we have men, we make mistakes, we stumble. Then there's outright groups that are undermining, are there to undermine the church actually. And so the schismatic group headed by, he calls himself Metropolitan Epiphany. He's the one who is leading this group that is under the ecumenical patriarch. Yes.
There's a term that we're going to you actually just used it, and just to clarify it for people that don't understand it, can you discuss ecumen? I always have the worst time saying this, ecumenism, and what that means.
Well, modern ecumenism is a very important, and the whole what's happening in Ukraine has to be understood in a lot of, there's a number of aspects going on here, and ecumenism is a big one, because inevitably, if someone watches some of the headlines, the Pope Francis just put out there to the Orthodox, hey, you guys, pick a date for Pascha, and we'll just accept it, and we'll all do Pascha on the same day. And we see all these ecumenical gatherings with the ecumenical patriarch. Sadly, also, let's be honest, representatives from the Moscow Patriarchate were there at times too. So it's not like they're not involved in this kind of global ecumenical movement. That's probably a different topic. But ecumenism really is seeking, ultimately at the heart of ecumenism, according to St. Justin Popovich, is a denial of truth. That's what it comes down to. There is no truth. There's no one body of Christ, the church. It's a denial of the church. And that's why St. Justin Popovich, he's a saint in the Orthodox Church, calls it the pan-heresy. It gathers together all of the heresies that Christianity has waged, fought against. That is untruth, their spiritual diseases. But ecumenism gives a whole lab in which they're able to breed and grow and of course discuss. Right? It's all about discussing things. Let's have a discussion. So ecumenism, modern ecumenism, and it doesn't stop. It started with Christian groups, of course. Let's all get along as Christians. There's too much fracturing. There's too much division. So we need to get along. So let's come together on the basic points where we're able to get along and pray together and pursue whatever it might be, things for the social well-being of our communities and the world around us. But especially on a doctrinal level, what had to be sacrificed was exactly that doctrine. Because according to ecumenism, doctrine doesn't matter. But according to Orthodoxy and Christianity, doctrine is vital. It's absolutely vital. Because that's what's dealing with truth. And Christianity is about truth. It's not about we're not sure what the truth is. No, from the Christian perspective, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That is, Jesus is God. And so we know the truth. He said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That's our hope as Christians, without which then why are we even trying to be Christians? If there's no hope for truth, then we can't be set free. And we're all just wandering around. So anyway, they started this on a Christian level, and of course now it's been expanded to non-Christian religions. They'll say the Abrahamic faiths such as Islam, Judaism, but you look at a lot of the papal gatherings that had for years and years now, the ecumenical gathering. There's Buddhists there. There's all kinds of very, very different religions are represented, because ultimately the message of ecumenism is we're all serving the same God. I think the Pope himself said that the diversity of religions is in fact part of God's will for the earth, which does not coalesce with the scriptures or Christianity, nor does it even coalesce with traditional Roman Catholic teaching. But that's also a different subject.
Yes, it is. It's explain then this ecumenical patriarch then, because that's kind of the group that seems to be in the heart of what we're doing here, other than maybe the State Department too. We'll get into that as well. But explain the ecumenical patriarch and what that is.
Well, the ecumenical patriarch is a very ancient see in the Orthodox Church. Rome was a patriarch of the church, the Roman patriarch. He left the church in roughly 1054 because there's a lot of history that precedes and follows that date. But that's the convenient date that we like to throw out there because we like convenient dates. But the ecumenical patriarch was the patriarch of Constantinople. Of course, Constantinople, as the city as it was known in Byzantium, fell in 1453. So he became essentially the patriarch of what is modern day today, to save on time, Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, hundreds of years ago, of course. But he retains that position of honor because of the deep roots historically there in the church. But sadly, I would say that the ecumenical patriarch, through various ways, again, when I talk about these things, it's important to understand, especially for Christians. What I try to approach on my blog is understanding the spiritual realities of things. I think that's what really counts. We look at physical manifestations. Those physical manifestations are on the geopolitical plane and, of course, social planes and all of these things. But ultimately, we know that, as the scriptures say, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. That is, we believe in Christianity that there's the devil, and he's seeking to destroy the church. He's seeking to destroy humanity. That's his job. That's his job. So he's going to do his job. We can bet, if we were betting, we could bet money on it. We'd win because he's going to do his job and he's going to attack humanity. He hates the truth very specifically. He hates the church absolutely, and anyone who's trying to follow that, he's going to wage warfare against, and that's what we're seeing in the Ukraine. And he uses, of course, material means, and that gets into geopolitics and things like that.
Yeah, and I want to get into that here in a second. There's another term I want you to discuss because it's shown a lot when you read writings about this, and I want people to understand this. Autocephalous. Can you talk about what that means is within Orthodoxy?
Sure. Ultimately, I mean, the basically it's a church that is self-governing. It's no longer directly dependent on the mother church that planted it. So when churches are missionized, of course, this is the way that it happens. Usually, an Orthodox church would send out, like, let's just take Russia for instance. Russia was missionized. Kievskaya Rus, Kiev itself, was missionized by Byzantium, by Constantinople, the Roman, what was the Christian Roman Empire, the actual one. And so they missionized the Rusian people, and at that time, of course, it was what is modern day Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, these areas, all of this territory is included in that. And of course, they missionized that, and it was under the See of Constantinople as a church under its authority, we might say, for hundreds of years. And then, after hundreds of years, the church in Russia was granted an independent status because it showed forth the fruits of orthodoxy in its own society. And that's very important. It was showing forth asceticism. It was producing saints. And all of these things are absolutely vital for a church to be autocephalous, autonomous, and these things. So it's you become of age. You can think of it in that sense. I have 5 kids. You have kids, they're babies, you rear them up, you teach them, you do all of these things, and then they become of age. And when they're of age, they get their own households, they start making their own money, they're on their own, so to speak. I mean, you still support them, pray for them, and all of this, but you're no longer, buying their clothes and doing all the instructing them on that level. They become autocephalous, so to speak,
Hmm.
autonomous. And so and think of it in that type of manner, that a certain local church gives birth to another church through missions. I mean, it's all the same church. Obviously, we're speaking of the local church, and once that local church comes of age, it's given usually autocephaly, or made autonomous. That is it's giving some kind of self-governance, but it shows it has the spiritual maturity to do that.
Got it. Got it. So, what's going on with what Zelensky is doing then in Ukraine as far as the Orthodox Church goes? What is Zelensky doing? What was that speech about? Because you hear a lot of rumors here and there, but we're looking for clarity here. What's he doing there?
Well, to understand that, it takes a lot. It's been going on for years, and that's the important thing to understand. And that even this tension in Ukraine with a self-declared Orthodox Church goes back for a while. Even during communist times, they had this, and really the current church that is under, or it's not a church. Sorry, I'm using that in a very loose way. But the current group that is under the EP has its roots that go back with these breakaway, self-ordaining, schismatic groups, back to the time of Soviet, and possibly before that, but just to keep it within maybe 100 years. So it's a deep historical issue that's happening. And so Zelensky, what he's doing is honestly not even his own policy. Poroshenko, the former president there in Ukraine, was very aggressively promoting. I mean, he was very aggressively promoting this church, this Orthodox Church of Ukraine, OCU as they call it, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church under Metropolitan Onufry. That's the canonical, true, long-standing Orthodox Church in Ukraine. just for those that are listening. So Zelensky really isn't doing something that novel or new. I think Mr. Jatris, right? Jim Jatris,
Yes.
forgive me if I messed up his last name, but he's great. He really did a lot of work. I think I sent you a few articles by him. There were earlier articles, even from 2018, but he really saw a lot of these things playing out. He's brilliant on that. He's really great on this level. And he spoke about that, Poroshenko and this agenda together, yes, with our own State Department. This is part of the physical manifestation, but they needed to make it look legitimate. They had to make it look legitimate. And so they needed an Orthodox patriarch to bring this schismatic, it's really nutty group into to make it try to make it look legitimate. And so Zelensky now is, I think, finally, it was put on hold for various reasons. It was on a back burner, so to speak, kind of a flight pattern. But now we're seeing Zelensky just doing what Poroshenko wanted to do in the very beginning. I think they've been wanting to seize, and Mr. Jatris speaks about this, that there was lists already back in the late, 2018, about this time of territory. Kiev Lavra, one of the big ones that they want. They just want. So it's about territory. It's about seizing assets. It's about, but ultimately, it's about undermining truth.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask about. There's a history between the United States and Russia as far as our CIA backing certain sects of orthodoxy, and the KGB backing uh, the Russian Orthodox, the Patriot of Moscow. Can you talk about how that basically played out? Because I've heard people now say, "Well, the KGB still infiltrates, the Russian Orthodox Church." Can you speak to that? I think we lost Father Zechariah.
I don't know if it's there. You back? Here we go.
There you go. We got you. We got you back. Can you hear me
Yeah, I
okay?
don't know. Yep. You were asking
Okay.
about Gao, KGB,
Yes, sir.
CIA, Constantinople.
Mhm. Correct.
Yeah,
You know.
that's all of these are huge subjects. I mean, they're all huge subjects, and worth investigating. I mean, the heresy is Sergianism, as it's called in Orthodoxy, and that goes back a while. Listen, let's be real. Religion is vital. Even those who are maybe on a secular plane, who aren't Orthodox, religion to anyone is vital to control it, to manipulate it, and to use it for your ends. It's been used throughout history. This shouldn't be shocking to us. And Orthodoxy is not exempt from that because, of course, the rulers of these times, especially in the secular times in which we live, they see religion. It's not divine revelation. It's just a construct of men. It's our Orthodoxy, just kind of the little exotic Eastern version of Christianity that was developed by the Greeks and the Russians and the Bulgarians and Romanians and whoever else. But it's there. It's just sitting. Let's co-opt it, right? And so this becomes, the Soviets did this, and I was in even church history with iconoclasm, you might say. The Byzantine emperors I'm probably using terms some might not. Iconoclasm was, you can't use icons in church, so they wanted to destroy all the icons or imagery in church. So the Byzantine emperors had a big program. It really was a state program in its beginning because it was led by emperors, and they needed the church on board, for instance. So that's just an example. And any religion can be used on that level. So I just want that to be clear. That the powers of this age are always willing to use anything that will help them, right? Will help them advance their agenda. And yes, during the Cold War, KGB did this, and the CIA was doing it. Absolutely. Um, so there's a, and it just comes, a guy, I'm just going to give a plug real quick for someone else, but he's really a guy that's brilliant on all this. His name's Jay Dyer. He does
Yes.
a lot of political analysis with religion, things like that. And on that level, he's great. But anyway, there's this book, The Rockefellers. That's their biography. It's the official one. Actually, years and years ago, I got it because Jay was referencing it. So I read through it also, and absolutely, you see people like the Rock. And so I'm going to tie all this together. The Rockefellers saw, and I addressed this in one of my posts, that Protestantism, the Protestant missions, they would go out, they would missionize an area, and inevitably it would turn people who converted Protestantism, it would orient them towards the West. And it made all of a sudden Western corporations' jobs a lot easier to go into that society. And so the Rockefellers thought, wow, they observed this because it was observable. And they decided, well, let's try to co-opt it. Instead of them going and giving a classic Protestant message, let's try to get them to begin to preach more of, what we would call an ecumenical message right now. And the Rockefellers would put tons of money into religion and to ecumenism and other things like that. The National Council of Churches and all of these things. So they're what we'll call, what people like to call the elites. So where's my quotations? Oh, here we go. There we go. The elites are into religion. They're not against it. Communism was an anti-religion. They wanted containable religion. They wanted that to promote. Very sadly, you had patriarchs of Moscow under communism denying that there was any persecution in the Soviet Union. They would flat out deny it. And the Soviets needed that. They absolutely needed that. So when Western Christians would rebuke the Soviets for persecuting Christians, they could bring up, the patriarch of Moscow, and he would say, "Oh, no, there's no persecution here. I don't know what you guys are talking about." But absolutely vital to the Soviet regime. So there's this whole aspect that has to be taken into account. God's bigger than it. But we as men, we can be bought out. Absolutely. Sadly, we can. Look at Judas. Should we be surprised?
And just to clarify now, like I mentioned, there's still people. I heard someone say to me just recently, well, what's going on in Russia? Putin is still, he had ties to the KGB. He really wants communism. This is all a farce. The KGB is still running the Russian patriarchy. Can you speak to that?
I don't know if I'm very versed necessarily to be able to speak to that too much. I don't know. I mean, who knows? There's so much disinformation, to use actually a psyop term. There's so much going on. So in the West, well, this is what I know. In the West, you always need a bad guy. We always have to have a bad guy. It's part of whenever we're fighting a war. And to understand, now I don't personally, people might, I don't agree with the war in Ukraine right now. Now, I don't have anything against Russia. I don't have anything, I live in America, but really on a certain level, what Russia is doing, surprise to most, is we might say no more, and probably less than what my own nation has done in its foreign policy to tons of different nations that we've bombed to obliteration, subjugated in the name of freedom and democracy. And, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Serbia. Let's go back to another Orthodox nation that was broken up by the US of A under the Clintons for very similar reasons, because we don't want, speaking we as in these Western, I'm just going to call it Western power elites for lack of a better designation, don't want strong traditional religions. They don't. Yes, Yamin too. I saw someone else in the comment section. So we don't want that. So we have to break it up. And we have to, we co-opted Islamic groups. This isn't conspiracy stuff. This is You can just go research it. We co-opted Islamic groups. A lot of the, bin Laden was co-opted by the CIA. That's not conspiracy. That's just what happened. A lot of the Kosovo Liberation Army was also funded much by the West. Terrible atrocities in Kosovo perpetrated against the Orthodox. It's genocidal, but supported again. So we have this long history. Why? Because we have a new message. The new message is, well, it was Americanism, and it's expanded to what I'll call globalism. And that's what we're preaching. And so religion has to be, and that's what we're seeing back to kind of ecumenism, has to be co-opted to preach this. And this is exactly what the Pope is preaching, what Patriarch of Constantinople is preaching. Not 100%. I'm not saying that's all they're preaching. I'm just saying, but that's a strong, the green, all the green stuff. You see the same lingo getting used, carbon, watch your carbon footprints, and all of this. That's not our language. That's not the language of the church. That's not the language of truth. That's the language of globalism for a very, for a very good reason. They want that kind of language to be adapted and to be preached. We saw this under let's see, we're on YouTube. So we on the Kufidism. So we saw that also, and all of the language we started adopting, social distancing, all of this. I mean, we just adopted it without really, a lot of Christians did, without thinking about it, without analyzing it, without weighing it on a higher scale. Anyway, so all that, I guess, my wandering to say, there's a clear intent. And so what Putin's intent is, I don't know. I don't live in Russia. I can't so much speak to Putin. But I can speak to my own society. I can speak to my own culture. I can speak to my own nation, because that's where I'm born. And I know my nation's role in Ukraine, in subverting the society there, because the Ukrainian society has been subverted by the U.S. Why? Because they Wolfowitz doctrine. You can't allow a resurgent Russia. You just can't allow it. That doesn't make Russia the good guy. That's not what I'm saying. People, we want to get caught in this dialectic, so to speak, this, like the Soviet times. We got to think above those things. So I'm not saying they're a good guy, and I'm not saying they're the bad guy. And not even all of America. I don't like sometimes coming out of the kind of the Russian side, like, oh, it's the demonic evil West. Well, we have some pretty demonic rulers, yeah, but in the West, we have people that want goodness. We have Orthodox Christians that are struggling. So pray for us. You know what I mean? Let's try to look above these things and understand that it's not the West necessarily. It is the devil and our common enemy who is working against all of us, especially from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, it says important to remember that Putin's party punished jab mandates, QR codes, etc. in Russia.
Yes, and he's correct. He's absolutely correct. They did, and they were at G20. I mean, they were just at the G20 meeting. So all that, I don't know. All I can do is offer it. What's that mean? They're at the G20. They're hobnobbing with these global elites. They're talking about agreeing. They all signed the thing for a global passport system. Russia even offered their sanitary shield. You can go look that up. To the world. Hey, we have this thing called the sanitary shield. We could implement it globally. So there's a lot of things. They're pushing digital things. So it's what's that mean? I don't know. God have mercy. It means probably means we need to pray more. That's probably what it means. It means we need as Orthodox, we need to pray more. We need more liturgies. We need more of this, because we how else are we going to? I mean, this is good to talk about it. I believe in making people aware, but ultimately, fundamentally, is it really going to change something? Probably not, but prayer will, God will. This is what we believe. This is the one. He's the one who's the master of history. He's the one who holds all things in his hands. And whether we like it or not, everyone from the Christian perspective, this is what the church understands. Everyone is ultimately working for one thing, and that is Christ is coming back. So it doesn't matter. I mean, the global, and it's probably going to get uglier, and we're going to have to live through that. But ultimately, they can't escape. And this is what the scriptures speak about. This is what the saints speak about. You can't escape the fact that Jesus Christ is coming back, and everything belongs to him. And he will call to account everyone, be they political leaders, be they church leaders, be they priests like me, be they laymen, whoever it is will all give an account. That's ultimately what is going on. Now, we can't escape that. There's no way. But as a Christian, I don't want to ask me. I don't want to live through something like communist persecution. I mean, I don't want to have to do that. But if it comes, then Lord have mercy, But I think the interesting thing, Buck, is that I don't know that it's going to be necessarily some jackboot persecution. I think it's going to be the fact that it's going to be our, the state of luxury, so to
Yes.
speak, or seeming well living that we have in the West. All of our stuff, those are the pressure points that they're going
Yes.
to use to keep us in line, so to speak. You want to be part of the system? Well, you have to, you still want internet access, you still want all this stuff, then you're going to have to capitulate. And if you don't, then, well, I don't know. God knows what will happen. Let us prepare our hearts. What more can we do?
Yeah, handmaid Leah, that's a perfect way to put it. Technological persecution, because
Yes.
that's
Technocracy is definitely a real thing.
yeah, and the easiest way to defeat people in the West in this system is through comfort. That's we're a society of comfort, and we love our safety. It's always in the name of safety. And even this ecumenism, I always have the worst trouble with that word. Ecumenism
It's all
is
right.
always cloaked. It's always cloaked in good,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, yes.
unity, and they play on this.
It's always because you can't sell blatant evil. You just can't do that. Communism sold itself as the embetterment of humanity, the fraternity of all the workers, workers of the world unite. It was all equal distribution of goods, all of these things that sound nice. But the problem is, and that gets into another subject. It gets into this idea of the heresy of millennialism or chiliasm. That is to establish we could say the kingdom of God on earth, but really we want paradise. What it is, we want paradise without God on earth. That's what we're trying to do. That's connected to technocracy and other things like that. But I wonder if I can real quick, Buck, there's an interesting document, and to understand kind of in Ukraine, what's going on. There is an interesting, it's been fascinating for me to investigate. It started with the Roman Catholic Church. I think it was applied against probably to Protestantism, and I believe that's what's happening right now in the Orthodox Church. But it was called the Doctrinal Warfare Program. I think I sent you a copy of
Yes.
one of the declassified documents that they've let us see this. But and I don't know. I sent you the longer one. Maybe I did send you the shorter one. I'll send it to you afterwards. But at the end of it, it's very interesting. Speaking of, it says, and I'll post this to my Telegram, a screenshot of it after this talk, so people can see it, they can read it. It says the agencies, speaking of the CIA, whatever, will give high and continued priority to all activities abroad supporting the objectives of this program. So that means everyone. That means the Orthodox Church. Now, a fellow named Wim Hof has done a lot of research on how they did this against Rome, which is important for us, I think, because the same tactics are being used on a physical plane, right? So it's good to be aware of. But this is important to what's happening in Ukraine. Down on this list, it says exploit local divergencies, heresies, or policies, disagreements within opposition systems. So we see that very important to this, that doctrine is a form of warfare for the powers that be. And especially when there's true doctrine is absolutely important for orthodoxy, and I think they understand that. And so what we're seeing is an implementation of that. There was a heresy. There was this fracturing already existent in Ukraine. They were able to identify that, and they've been able to play upon that, trying to weaken what they think is, quote unquote, Russian soft power. But beyond that, it's also to weaken anything that would give people a traditional, just speaking generally, traditional grounding, a traditional worldview, something that is not, modern and secularized, so to speak. And so what do you have to do? Well, you have to exploit that. That's exactly what is happening in Ukraine. You see that the schismatic group supports all the LGBT, the Skittles stuff, right? I mean, they're for it. Mike Pompeo, when they were formed, was one of the first people to congratulate them. So there's this deep connection and to understand, and we see it. It's in some on a practical level. We see it doing what they want it to do, and that's inevitably begin to fracture, as if possible. I mean, in its essence, it can, but fracture the institutional relationships of orthodoxy. And we see that because, and it's important because we can't have fellowship with schismatics, with these men that are very godless. They're not ordained, but the ecumenical patriarch, for various reasons, has brought them in, so to speak, or thinks he has. And there's the church, in Alexandria. There's these various churches that have recognized them, are already praying with them. So we have a severe problem. And sticking our head, kind of, I feel like in America, our problem resolution is let's stick our head in the sand until it goes away. I'm not sure that that's the best thing to do, because obviously it's just fermented, and obviously it's just become more acute, this problem. And now we're at a very, it's really, it's going to have vast ramifications. It really does. But they're trying to build a new orthodoxy, a new, and some of my blogs, I touch upon this, a new, what I would call unia.
Yeah, I liked you use the phrase "New World Orthodoxy" as well, which I thought
Yes.
was
Yeah, I kind
appropriate.
of get that from Father Seraphim Rose too. He calls it world
Mhm,
orthodoxy.
mhm. There's a feeling that for a lot of us that pure, true orthodoxy, the church is kind of the last bastion standing against secularism, nihilism, modern modernity, all of these things. And from what I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, the schismatic group in Ukraine is basically being funded or undermined or infiltrated by worldly powers, elites, and things like that, as to basically filter out true orthodoxy, pure orthodoxy, real orthodoxy. Is that what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know from the saints that there's going to be there, there's going to be people that look, they have to look orthodox. They have to have the vestments. They have to have the right, um, the priests, the hierarchy, the icons. And so this is very important. I mean, that's why I refer to it as a new unia, because this was, I think, um, first kind of tried by the enemy under the Council of Brest. That's when the Uniatism, or Eastern Rite Roman Catholicism, as some would call it, was formulated. And it was for this very reason, to get the Orthodox to leave Orthodoxy. And so the compromise was, we'll allow you to retain your outer rights, even a married priesthood. So Rome made certain concessions, but you have to accept, essentially, and this is what, the articles of the union even say this themselves. It's, you have to accept the Roman Catholic heart, or dogma, doctrine, all of it. And that's what matters, because once you have the heart, you have the system, you have everything, you own it. And so that's very important. The enemy knows this. Why? Because God knows it. It's all throughout the scripture. He knows the scriptures. He knows how important the heart is to to life in God. And so conversely, it's also very important to life without God, so to speak. And so I think this is kind of a struggle, that ecumenism and what's happening in Ukraine is the progression of uniatism, and we're going to be offered a new orthodoxy, right? So we can still go and we can still have our liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and we'll still have our icons, and unless, of course, maybe there's a new pandemic going around, then you won't be able to venerate them. But never mind that. It's okay. You'll have the outer trappings, but the inner life of the church will be completely sold out. It'll be this new message that we touched upon earlier of ecumenism, of one world government. I mean, religion and government.
Mhm.
They go hand in hand, but they need it. They need, why did the CIA have a whole program called the Doctrinal Warfare Program for this one goal, to co-opt religion, so that religion begins to preach what? Americanism. They did that, with the Roman Catholics. Wim Hof elaborates upon this in great detail with Vatican II and other things. And I think that's what's happening with the ecumenical patriarch. Lord have mercy on him. Lord have mercy on Bartholomew. It's not to, I can't to persons. God will judge persons. I can speak to what I see, events that I see happening, and we have to be able to try to discern those events in a prudent and judicious manner. And we have all this information. It's not far-fetched. It's not conspiracy theories. It's all actual conspiracy. And if we want to stick our head in the sand about it, then Lord have mercy. But let's bring it back to the United States. I sent you that article about all those people in the U.S. It's all
Yes.
connected. The church in Ukraine, this schismatic group, is connected to this whole thing. Why do all then the what's the right thing? These people within Orthodoxy promoting anti-Orthodoxy, why do they all then support blatantly, just kind of blatant, just the whole the Ukrainianism, I'm going to call it, because I love Ukraine. I love the people, as an incredible culture. I love Metropolitan Onufry. I was blessed to meet him briefly. I've met hierarchs in the Ukrainian church. I love Ukraine. I love it, and it's so I want to. I'm very, but I'm not pro any more than I'm pro the governments that I have in the U.S. I'm not pro what's going on, co-opted governments that begin to attack truth. I'm not for that. So I'm against that. But I'm very much for, especially the faithful in Ukraine who are suffering immensely right now, and in a very, very difficult situation.
I gotta get you out of here pretty quickly. I don't want to keep you too long, but there's a few things I
Yeah, it's
wanted
all
to
right.
ask
Sure.
really quick. Well, and I have to get out of here too, shortly. Um, there's a lot of, let's say, Orthodox. There's a lot of new people in the Orthodox world over the last few years, including myself. There's been, maybe it's small, but certainly a resurgence, I think, and it's been energized. And for us, those of us who are new, and even those who have been Orthodox for a long time, are there any warning signs that you can see or that we should be aware of of this happening here in the United States, what we're talking about happening in Ukraine?
Well, I think it's been happening in the United States. There's multiple fronts. There's always multiple fronts. Fordham, um,
Mhm.
the Huffington Institute of Ecumenical Institute. I think they call themselves something like that. Or, Orthodoxy and Dialogue, the Wheel. Um, we can, other ones. That's just kind of a few off the top of my head. They're all pushing. It's not that even sometimes what they're saying is 100% wrong, because it's never 100% wrong.
Right.
It never is. But St. Ignatius tells us that if you mix a little bit, I'm kind of paraphrasing, you miss one drop of poison with honeyed wine, it's still going to kill you. That's the point. It's just get the drop in, and then we start withering away. And those groups, some of them, again, someone did some great research and tracking of local funding, NGO funding, and things like that. They hate true orthodoxy. We have to understand that. Fordham, yes, I said Fordham, yes. The what is that, IOTA, International Orthodox Theological Association,
Mhm.
and again, it's not that all 100% all of them are. That's not the point. But the problem is they are subverting true orthodoxy. They're speaking about exactly what we see happening in Ukraine, and this is the goal. You have to co-opt, as the doctrinal warfare program says. I mean, this is ultimately demonic. He's just you, but we are the human manifestations of the church. The church works through people, right? God uses people, and so on the same level, the devil uses people. That's what he does. He co-ops people. He uses them. The Lord does this. That's why we have the saints. They're his. They've given their hearts to him. They've been transformed by him, and then they become vessels for God in our world. And the same thing, sadly, for on the other hand, is that we can do the same things. So that's what we have to understand. And God save people. May God have mercy on people. But when they're working for evil, I can't stand idly by. This is what the saints, I think, make clear. So they, this pushing, of course, the whole LGBTQ whatever stuff, all of this is very important, not because they care about these people, not at all, obviously, but
Right.
because they know it's extremely effective for undermining traditional societies and cultures. Extremely effective. That's why it's part of the anti-gospel that has to be preached, and we see that in these groups, these Orthodox groups. They're actively promoting those kind of things. They're actively promoting ecumenism. It's one thing to be friendly with people. Of course, we can be friendly, with other people. But can I go pray with people? Like, can I go pray with, at some group meeting with Roman Catholics? I can't as an Orthodox. I can't do that. That's not because I want to be a meanie. Oh, you guys think you're the only ones. Well, no, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the truth but through me. I didn't say that. That's not my idea. The church tries to live by that. And the Orthodox Church indisputably claims that she is, in her essential reality in her life, that truth on earth. Protestantism doesn't. I mean, I was a Protestant. They have no exclusive truth claim. Rome did, but now they don't. They've wholeheartedly imbibed. But really, I think it is this papal Protestant system that began to erode Christianity, true Christianity, and now it's being applied to Orthodoxy. So what we're seeing in Ukraine is what is happening in our own nation also, because they have to push, and we have all these people pushing. Sadly, we have some even in positions of authority, supporting, giving wind, so to speak, in the sails of these kind of organizations. How what's going there, I don't know. Lord have mercy. But so Lord have mercy. Yeah, that's these groups clearly are trying to subvert the truth. It's what they say it all over, and then people, you say this stuff, and people are like, that's crazy. Wow, where'd you get that? No, it's not. They say it themselves, and if we don't listen to them, then we're stupid. We're just stupid, you know. And if people didn't learn through what happened under the Kufidism, then I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, what's going, because that was clearly the I'm not just trying to pick on it, and because I want to, I can't give up, that whole thing that happened. I'm bringing it up because it indicates things.
Yes.
And it indicates that we were co-opted, and that not just in Orthodoxy, but across the board, Christianity en masse was co-opted to promote and preach the Kufid gospel, not the gospel of Jesus Christ, in the name, of course, of the good of my neighbor.
Right.
Of course, because you don't want to be a meanie. You don't want grandma to die. That was so. They're always making those appeals to our emotions, our feelings, and things like that. Anyway, I kind of wandered there.
No, that was beautiful. Yeah, I think people can feel the love that you have, just coming through the screen. For sure. I know the Inkless Pen blog has a lot of stuff on this topic that we've been talking about. So, of course, we want to plug that. Are there any other resources you give people out there where they can learn about some of these things we've been talking about?
Let's see here. I try to post articles I find of interest. Jim, read Jim
Jatris, yes.
Jatris, yes, his articles, even his older articles. I mean, some of it was doing with events that have kind of taken place and are done, but a lot in there, even some of his older articles from 2018, he's calling these things, and it's taken, I think, a little bit more to develop for various reasons, but his analysis of the situations are very important. On the psyop level, doctrinal warfare level, like I said, I gave a plug for Jay Dyer. He has a lot of good information on that.
Yes.
I think the fellow, again, he's Roman Catholic, so you have to kind of sort through that. But I can't emphasize enough. I'm convinced that the same things are being applied, and we see Archbishop Elpidophoros, his vague comments about abortion, his baptizing, the mother of God was given a choice too. You're like, what? What's that
Hmm.
supposed to mean? And that's the way it's always starting. And then, um, then you have the baptism of that. We know that thing. And is anything done about this? No, it just goes. Why? Because they're just pushing the agenda slowly, slowly, slowly. This is the way they work. So that doctrinal warfare program, on a physical level, of course, we have to understand it's spiritual, but on a physical level, it helps. We can begin to identify these things. Um, and then that Wim Hof, I believe, is his last
Yeah.
name.
Yes.
And he did a lot of. He has a blog, I believe. You can find his blog. Maybe I think it's called The American Proposition. Um, and he has a lot of interesting things. Again, he's Roman Catholic, so he's plugging some things for Rome, but his observations on that level, I think, are very valid. Um, so
Excellent. We had Jay Dyer in the chat here.
what?
Yeah, he says thank you
What?
for that nice
Jay?
book.
Oh, of course, Jay's. Yeah, God bless you, Jay.
And we have a super chat. My friend Marshall is asking. I assume you're familiar with the book "Resistance to Evil by Force." Are you familiar with that
I
one?
am. I haven't read it though.
Okay.
But I have a stack of books, but I've never read it. No, I've heard of it.
Thank you, Jay. You're an inspiration, so I appreciate the compliment. Father Zecharia Lynch, any parting words for the people?
Well, to those, I'm gonna try to speak just real quick to,
Yes,
if
sir.
you're just listening to this and you're not Orthodox, then, get informed. I would say, of course, I'd plug the only way we're going to really resist anything is through spiritual life. Um, but be informed, do your research. You have to feel at some point people are always trying to shut you down because they oh, that's crazy, that's this or that, and at some point you have to just stop caring about that. You're not going to get it all right. That's not the point. The point isn't to be 100% right, but the point is, especially a Christian perspective, to be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove, and to be aware of the signs of the times in which we live. This is absolutely vital. This is what the scriptures call us to, especially Christians, especially Orthodox Christians, because we have to be able to speak to those times. And so it's good. The devil really doesn't do anything too new, but he does adjust himself to the times and the way that we will accept him. And so a lot of that the geopolitical manifestations are manifestations of real spiritual happenings, And the whole push for global government, for global religion, has nothing to do with Jesus Christ, has nothing to do with him and his church. And so I think we have to be very aware of that. and understand that, yes, orthodoxy, they're deeply trying to, not that they can, true orthodoxy, it can't be, but they want to co-opt, as we spoke about. I would just give that, be very sober. So I'm going to just give a few other little plugs. If you haven't read this, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future,
Yes.
read it. Another good one, if you're not too familiar, it's kind of get your feet wet from an Orthodox perspective. Spiridon Bailey, Orthodoxy and the Kingdom of Satan.
Yes.
He covers a lot of things. I mean, it's if someone's already been researching things, then they're going to know some of those things. But it's definitely kind of. And then the whole volume is set by Elder Athanasius. There we go. I always go the wrong way on cameras, on the book of Revelation, so much in here that is touching upon what we see happen. And again, the point isn't, we don't want to be, on the one hand, lackadaisical. I think that's really a problem. And a lot, I think I see people in Orthodoxy, I'm speaking to the Orthodox, really kind of championing something that's lackadaisical, certain groups calling into question the teaching of saints like Saint Paisius on the end times, calling them Protestant, of course, because what else would it be? Oh, you don't want to be a Protestant, so that's a great thing. And so this general question, which I think is all part of this whole spirit, right? But on the other hand, we don't want to be, of course, we don't want to be late great planet Earth kind of thing, oh my gosh. So we have to be wise. We have to walk the royal middle path. Jesus Christ, our Lord God and Savior, is going to return. Is that going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be? I can't tell you that. But we know that all of history is streaming towards that one point, as I said earlier. We know that from the scriptures. Our job is to be ready and prepared as much as we are able to do, especially through the spiritual life. But also so that we're not caught up in the very clear, because we're psychological beings, and the devil understands that. Sorry, I'm going again. Forgive me, Buck. But we're psychological beings. The devil knows how we work. He knows better how we work than we ourselves know how we work, and he knows how to manipulate us. And unless we're aware spiritually and practically of those spiritual manipulations, we'll just fall prey to them. Again, there was a lot of good-hearted people. I'm not trying to blast anyone, but I would just say Kufidism again shows that a lot of, because we weren't discerning. That's my thoughts. I mean, whatever. This is an interesting little book, propaganda by.
Yes.
It's not orthodox, but if you want to just see, get your feet wet with what kind of tactics. I mean, and this is written back in, I forgot, what is it, the 50s or the 40s?
Yeah,
and
I believe it was
an
the
old
50s, I think.
it's
Yeah.
an old book.
That's
Anyway,
a good one too.
but he's just speaking about that. Oh yeah, this is what we do, and
Yes.
propaganda, as he points out, doesn't have to be bad, but there's a clear goal, and religion, orthodoxy, is part of that in the minds of globalism, because you can't have a traditional Christian religion. You can't have that. Because traditional Christian religion, according to their own, that is the globalists' own testimony, is not conducive with what they want to do. So you have to get rid of it. And that doesn't mean jackboot, we're going to destroy it like in Soviet times. No, we're more finessed. We're going to co-opt it. We're going to give them the religion they want. And even the Soviets did this a little bit, like with Sergianism. So we'll give them that. But the message is going to be, watch your carbon footprint.
Yes.
The message is going to be, whatever it is, it's going to, and we see that already. We'll see letters from people of authority, and they're using this lingo. Well, let's talk about, I would say, let's talk about creation, but let's talk about it from the Orthodox. We have something to say about creation. Let's have that conversation. Let's not talk about carbon footprint, because that's all just just that's a new gospel.
Yeah.
It's an anti-gospel ultimately, so to speak. I'm just kind of picking on some. Anyway, I kind of ranted. Forgive me.
No, that was beautifully put. That was beautifully put. And now I've got to bring this stream to an end. I hate to do it because I could go on with you for quite some time. But thank you so much, Father Zechariah Lynch, for
Well,
being here.
thank you for having me, Buck. You're doing a good work, and I appreciate. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Those are just my thoughts. People can take it or leave it, so to speak. And if you'd like to talk more about it, I'd be happy to get on.
Yes.
Again,
Yeah. We
anyway,
definitely have
whatever
to
it's
do this.
worth. It's important stuff, people. I mean, really, I think it's important. And we just have to, yeah, God will guide us. Lord have mercy. So God bless you all.
Amen. Thank you.